All right, let's take a trip back in time. But we're not going to look at dusty old battles or political treaties. No, we're asking a way more interesting question. What did people in America find funny like over 150 years ago? Seriously, let's dive into this. Because what a country laughs at, well, that tells you almost everything you need to know about its soul.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Before you could just doom scroll for a cheap laugh, what was humor even like? Turns out, comedy back then was this incredible mirror, and it was reflecting all the crazy ambitions, the deep-seated fears, and just the pure, wonderful absurdity of a country that was changing by the minute.
So, to give you a real sense of it, we've put together what we're calling a tasting menu. We're going to sample 3 totally different flavors of comedy from that era, and each one tells us something really unique about the folks who were writing the jokes, and of course, the folks who were laughing at them.
Okay, first up on the menu, our appetizer, satire. You see, the 19th century was just buzzing with these idealists. You know, people trying to build perfect little societies, utopias. But, as some hilarious writers pointed out, these grand, high-minded experiments usually ran into one major, unfixable problem: actual human beings.
Just look at this breakdown of a fictional utopian community called Arcadia. On the left, you've got the dream, right? Universal candor, totally pure foods, a life of just being. And then you look at the reality: drunken insults, super petty arguments, and my favorite detail, one guy secretly sprinkling salt on his supposedly pure vegetables from a dirty little box lid he was hiding. That giant, hilarious gap between the dream and the reality, that's where the comedy lives.
So the community's #1 rule was total, brutal honesty. They thought it was the key to enlightenment. But here's the thing. One of the members, Abel, insisted that this super potent Scotch ale was a natural beverage. So you add a little too much of that to the mix, and suddenly their noble candor just turns into these vicious, cutting insults. And just like that, the whole lofty idea starts to fall apart at the seams. It's perfect. All right, for our main course, we're going to switch gears from that sharp satire to something that feels really American: the tall tale. The goal here isn't to expose anybody's hypocrisy. It's just to tell the most unbelievably wild story you can possibly imagine, all with a completely straight face. This kind of humor was just made for the frontier, for a country so huge and untamed that, honestly, anything seemed possible. You know, the absolute key to a good tall tale is all in the delivery. The storyteller has to be totally deadpan, like they're reading a legal document, no matter how ridiculous the story gets. This was how they created local legends, turning regular people into these larger-than-life heroes. And nobody, I mean nobody, was better at this than Mark Twain. His story, The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, is pretty much the gold standard. So, the hero of this tall tale is a frog named Daniel Webster. And his owner, a fellow named Jim Smiley, claims to have educated him into a world-class athlete. Just look at this resume. The frog can do somersaults, he's an expert fly catcher, and of course, he's modest about it all. Twain just keeps piling on these absurd details with such a serious tone that you can't help but get completely sucked in. So then, one day, a stranger wanders into town and challenges this legendary frog. He sizes up Daniel Webster and delivers this classic, unimpressed line. Well, Jim Smiley, being fiercely proud of his frog, of course, immediately bets $40 that his frog can outjump any frog in the whole county. The stage is set. And here it is, the punchline. While Smiley is off finding another frog for the competition, the stranger grabs a teaspoon and fills poor Daniel Webster up to his chin with tiny lead pellets. So when it's time for the big jump-off, the new frog leaps away, no problem. But Daniel, he can't even move. He's planted as solid as an anvil. It's just this brilliant, ridiculous scam told with the seriousness of a funeral. Okay, for our final course, our dessert, if you will, we've got a flavor of comedy that feels shockingly modern. It's the humor you find in just everyday frustrations. And this stuff proves that while technology might change, some things, like a simple trip to the store, have always been able to drive people completely insane. This story is called A Piece of Red Calico by Frank R. Stockton. And the setup is, well, it's about as simple as it gets. A guy's wife sends him on an errand. Just go to the store and buy a piece of fabric to match this little sample she gave him. Sounds easy, but oh, it is not. What happens next is a bureaucratic nightmare that any of us could have lived through last week.
He gets sent from one counter to the next. Then they send him up to the second floor, then to a room at the far end of the hall. Then, get this, back downstairs, only to be told the fabric is actually on the 6th floor. And at every single stop, the clerks keep telling him what he really wants is this other fabric called turkey red. So after this insane runaround, he finally just breaks. He gives up. He says, "All right, give me turkey red." It's the perfect story about the timeless hell that is customer service. So, after sampling all these different flavors of comedy, what's the takeaway? Well, whether it's making fun of our most idealistic dreams or just our most boring frustrations, it seems like 19th century humor was all about exploring the flaws that make us, well, us.
When you break it down, you see they had a really powerful set of tools. They used satire to call out anyone who was getting a little too full of themselves. They used exaggeration to celebrate just pure, wild absurdity. And they used social commentary to point out the frustrations of this new, modern way of life. And it was all delivered with that classic, deadpan American wit. These weren't just jokes. This was a young country trying to figure itself out, one laugh at a time. Which really just leaves us with one last question to chew on. Just like we're looking back and laughing at their utopian communities and their nightmare shopping trips, what parts of our 21st century lives, our trends, our anxieties, our weird obsessions, what's going to be the big punchline for the people who come after us? What do you think they'll find funny about us?